That is a scene from John Carpenter's Starman. You realize that to sit with you and have a dialogue about Starman, the story, the content, would be to destroy the fun that the movie audience will have going to see it. But I think it's important to point out, sitting with you, that if ever a filmmaker had managed from his first conscious awareness of film to go full circle, you have. Because as a 5-year-old boy, you sat in a movie theater with your parents and saw, ironically, considering the content of Starman, it came from outer space. And when that meteor hit the screen and you thought, hit you.
That's right.
There was nothing in your mind from then on except to make motion pictures.
That was the problem my parents had with me. There's nothing else in my mind but that, yeah. You know, the first film I ever saw was when I was 4 years old. It was actually The African Queen.
Really?
And the thing I remember vividly about that were the leeches on Humphrey Bogart's back. I'll never forget that as long as I live. I saw the film again recently, and it's sort of, now, you know. But as a child, wow, what was that?
But isn't that what we were saying when we shook hands a few moments ago, that when you are a kid and when you go to the movies, there's no such thing as a good movie, bad movie, indifferent movie. We are never film critics.
That's right.
We are transposed and transported by what's happening in front of us.
That's right.
What's the turning point with you, John? When did you stop being merely transposed? Was it that first 8mm camera your father gave you?
I don't remember exactly the time. It was probably when I was watching movies as a kid, but I decided I want to be able to do that on the screen. I've got to be able to learn how to do that. My dad gave me his home movie camera, and with this particular camera came a projector, a screen, and an editing outfit, so I could edit my own films, and I finally began to really get into the process of movies. Then I was hooked.
Were you really 8 years old when you started?
Yeah.
I wondered, you know, when I was looking at your credits, and after you were probably, as the man who made the original Halloween for $300,000.
$320,000.
I beg your pardon. $320,000,
Yeah.
and watched it gross $80 million. Well, you became the latest boy wonder to the studios, because anybody who could do that for $320,000 was someone they should know. I just think that you've said so much about the studio system and the kind of dinosaur inefficiency that goes with it. And I quoted you at the opening of this about the feeling of wanting to make great movies, and that the essence of movie making can no longer be the filmmaker's responsibility to the financiers or the making of money for oneself.
It sounded a little pretentious, though, didn't it? Unfortunately, what I said.
I thought it sounded sincere.
Did it sound all right?
Sure.
Yeah. I think now, listening to what I said, I think you have to be, you can't be irresponsible to the money. Irresponsibility, perhaps, and I don't want to criticize something that's been criticized so much, but Heaven's Gate, for instance, I think went extremely far in that area, and I don't think that's necessary to make a film. But always, it's the movie that counts. It's always the film. It's always the narration. We're storytellers, directors, and we should be telling good stories.
I remember when you were working at Universal, and The Thing at the time was the only feature film in production at Universal. You are one of the few filmmakers who, upon finding out that equipment you had not requested was being installed, or facilities you would not need were added to your budget, that you got up and you made a fight, and you had some of those things removed.
The green beds is what they're called.
Those are the lighting racks.
That's right. We didn't need them. Our whole approach to lighting the thing was to light it as if we were on location. And when you're in a real building, in a real location, you can't take the roof off and put lighting beds in there. You have to light from the floor. And that's what we wanted to do on The Thing, to give it a very realistic feel. And the studio was used to automatically giving you that, putting that, but charging you for it, whether you ask for it or not, and it's extremely expensive. And so bang, here were the green beds up there. And, well, what's this? We're not even going to use them. And no one consulted with the cameraman, the director of photography, no one consulted with me, so sure.
Did you indeed spend the $13.7 million on The Thing that was listed as the budget?
Yes, we did. We actually spent all of that, and primarily because we hit a lot of bad weather on that film on a glacier in Alaska, and we shot for longer than we wanted to. And As we'll have it, the special effects took a great deal of money, a great deal more money to do than I had hoped.
Well, Karen Allen and Jeff Bridges are the stars, your stars, in Starman.
Yeah.
One can't help but notice the number of times you have worked with Kurt Russell. Elvis, by the way, your television movie of Elvis was on again recently.
Oh, was it?
Yes,
Yeah.
in Canada. And one sits there and watches it and is reminded again of what a wonderful piece of movie making that is.
It worked out all right.
I think it worked out particularly all right.
You know, I was disappointed in a little of it because of the music. I felt that they televisionized the music. There was a chase sequence and they made it sound like the Beverly Hillbillies. But that's something you have to live with. A point in my career where I didn't have the control over the creative end of it as I kind of do now.
It's a reminder, too, of how much you wanted to do that Western with John Wayne and Elvis Presley.
Yeah, it's been great.
And how interesting it really would have been with the right script.
Oh, sure.
To see those two personalities. Was it really his poor health?
Yeah.
And then the option expired?
Well, he hit bad health first, and he had a resurgence of his cancer, and then his son, who I was working with, Michael Wayne, told me, it's not going to happen. It's just not going to happen.
Too bad.
Yeah.
We will take a commercial break. Be right back with John Carpenter and more right after this. Karen Allen is explaining to Jeff Bridges in Starman what love is. The irony is that she is explaining it to someone who has no concept of love.
That's right.
However, he certainly has a concept of love by the time Starman is over.
You know, Starman is really, I think, about two people who are alienated, let's say. He is a real alien from another planet. He's come down to Earth, and he's looking around, and his story is about becoming a planet Earth person, a human being, and human feelings. But I think Karen's story is about a woman who is alienated from being a human because she's lost her husband. And she learns about love again through this man who looks just like her husband.
The other thing that you give us, which you have talked about giving moviegoers in the past, is that sense of trapped. We are all trapped.
Oh, yeah.
At the other end is death.
That's right.
Like one of those songs, you know, life is tough and then you die. But there are moments during it where we are supposed to be enjoying life. I mentioned at the beginning of this that you were an Academy Award-winning filmmaker. I should point out that the Academy Award was won for the best live action short subject, which was called The Resurrection of Bronco Billy. It was 1970. You had barely come out of film school.
That's right. Those were the old days.
But this passion you talk about for the Western, that you could be perfectly happy if you just made 15 or 16 Western movies. Your passion is Howard Hawks and the Western film. Now, beginning with that Academy Award, where is the follow-up to The Resurrection of Bronco Billy? Where are these Westerns you feel such passion for, John?
Well, they're yet to come. Yet to come. Westerns kind of went through tough times in the 70s and the 80s, I think, primarily because of television ruined them for the audience, because you saw so many Westerns and so many kinds of Westerns, and the Western themes and the Western heroes got driven into the ground. And I think also the spaghetti Western had something to do with it. As great as Sergio Leone was, and Once Upon a Time in the West is one of my favorite films of all time, I think that had something to do with sort of ending them also, because what do you follow with after that? I'm waiting, and I think we're all waiting for a time when the Western is brought back in the same way that science fiction was brought back by Star Wars. Because you couldn't get an audience, a big audience, a broad audience, to go see a science fiction film and really support it and really enjoy it until Star Wars came along, and it transformed the genre. It really was Buck Rogers, and it really was sort of a Western idea, but done differently, done with love and feeling. And that's what I think Westerns have to be. As yet, I haven't found that transformation vehicle, but I will.
Have you still got that script that you might have done with John Wayne and Elvis Presley?
Certainly. But the problem is now, who do you get to play John Wayne? Who's John Wayne? Who has those qualities of an actor. And I'm a big fan of Clint Eastwood. I'm a very big fan of his. But John Wayne was something special. He had, as well as strength and as well as dignity and singleness of purpose in his portrayals, he had vulnerability. John Wayne's performance in The Searchers is a staggering performance. I mean, it's brilliant. People don't give him credit for the actor that he was.
You're only going to mention Howard Hawks' titles?
John Ford.
Oh, was the Searchers was John Ford?
Yes, it was.
That's right.
That's right.
When you say that about the Western, what in your opinion, with Starman, is the line from E.T. to Starman to Cocoon, where are we so disillusioned and unaccepting of what's on Earth that we want to be reassured that there's a degree of goodness visiting us from a source other than ours?
I think you're absolutely right. I think it goes even a little deeper than that, but that's exactly it. I think that there's been a change in the United States in filmmaking over the past 5 or 6 years, and I think it began with the rescue mission in Iran when it failed. I think we all hit bottom and said we can't win anymore. And I think that we want to believe we can win. I think that's part of Ronald Reagan's appeal. He's kind of like the coach who says, let's go out and do it. If you notice, after the Iranian rescue mission, there was a hockey game between the United States and Russia, and when we beat them, we went nuts. We were cheering and screaming. Look at the Olympic Games. So winning now, what does it mean to people? Well, I think it means going out and making a lot of money and being successful, and it's a lot of those kind of values. And there's a part of that that scares me a lot, because real life is not necessarily winning. There's a lot of real life that you don't win in, and I think that people have a need to feel an optimism about it and feel that there's hope, that there's benevolence from above. I think at the bottom of it all, though, it is a fear of freedom. We are frightened to take responsibility for our lives. We want somebody else to do it, somebody else to show us that there's goodness, that there's beauty, that there's healing, and we want it to come from up there. It should come from here.
Boy, for a man who doesn't believe in God, and doesn't believe in the devil, you sure have a spiritual source.
Well, I don't know that it's spiritual.
Have you changed since becoming a father?
I've changed, but I don't think this is the result of it. What is causing this is I look around. I made a film that I was extremely proud of, and I thought was one of my best works. Was called The Thing, and it was about the evil from within. It was a very nihilistic, pessimistic film about the end of the world. And I noticed that people didn't want to see that. They didn't want to deal with that. They didn't want to deal with the evil from inside and that loss of humanity, because I think it touches really close to real life. The Thing was an allegory for real life. And I noticed that people went to see E.T., which is an entirely different kind of film. It's a very hopeful, optimistic film. It's sort of Lassie Comes Home as a science fiction movie. I'm not trying to put it down. I'm just saying that's what it brings out in your emotions. It's like when I was a kid and I saw Old Yeller. I cried for the dog, you know. So I notice, I see people are really, they're looking for hope. They're looking for beauty, and
they bought tickets to see Christine.
They did buy tickets to see that. And they did buy
Where does hope fall between not seeing The Thing, lining up to see Christine, and you making Starman?
Well, Christine was an entirely different kind of film than The Thing, I think. Christine.
Oh, that wasn't a comparative study.
Yeah, right. I think that the audience had fun in Christine. It was a rock and roll movie about teenagers and cars, and that, you know, that's a whole thing that you can get into and escape in. But this was just an observation on the audience and people, and they are people I make movies for. Not the primary reason I made Starman, but I thought of It Happened One Night when I read the screenplay of Starman. I thought, here's a chance to do It Happened One Night with a science fiction premise behind it. And then I thought, you know, It Happened One Night came at the end of a kind of a Depression film cycle when the country was doing badly back then. There was those kinds of comedies. And I thought, that's interesting. That's real interesting. I bet it'll work out. So that's yet to be seen, but we'll We'll find out.
On that, we will take a commercial break.
Okay.
And be right back with John Carpenter. John Carpenter is with us. We've been talking about work. From the days of being a film student and the kind of passion with which you entered film school, having said to your parents from childhood, I'm going to Hollywood to be a film director. I'm sure there aren't many kids who've said that. And their parents probably smiled and thought, well, we'll steer him onto something else as he grows up.
Right.
But I've always been curious about you. When you gathered together those friends as a kid, and you made Gorgon, the monster from outer space, was Tommy Lee Wallace, who you had a hand in hiring to do Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, one of those childhood friends?
Yes, he was, as a matter of fact. He also played with me in a rock and roll band through later high school years and early college years in Kentucky.
What was your band called, John?
Kaleidoscope.
Kaleidoscope?
Yes, yeah. It was right when psychedelic music was really popular. We do a pretty good rendition of Purple Haze, as I remember, by Jimi Hendrix.
With Starman and fait accompli and available to moviegoers, is the next project a Western? And are you going to have a job soon for your wife, Adrienne Barbeau, or is she going to stay at home for another year with John Cody, your son?
Well, I don't know what the next job is going to be. I'm working on a screenplay now, which is a war movie, as a matter of fact, and a movie about helicopters, which I'm very interested in. I think that Adrienne and I are looking for something to do together. But right now, she's so happy mothering and having a great time doing that. I think she'll stay doing that for a little bit.
You're going to make a movie about helicopters after all you know about Blue Thunder?
I'm a helicopter pilot.
Oh, you are?
And they haven't done one yet that's been right, so maybe I can do one.
Gee, maybe Ray Stark will let you rent that helicopter that's sitting in the back lot.
Please, I don't want to.
Have you been offered a lot of television work? When I think of the early television work in the movies, Someone's Watching Me, which of course was how you met Adrienne Barbeau and married. You also had Lauren Hutton in it.
And David Burney, yeah.
David Burney. Elvis was, of course, a television movie. There have been other projects. Is television being offered to you, or are you just avoiding it?
No, it's not been offered to me. And you know, I would love to have done Fatal Vision. I don't know if you saw that.
Yes, I did.
I thought that was terrific. And I'm a big nonfiction fan. I like to read nonfiction books, and that was an extremely fascinating book, extremely well written.
Did you express interest in the possibility of doing it ever?
By the time I read it, it had already been made, so I wasn't able to do it. But I think people see me as a film director now, and I tend not to get offered things. And that's a kind of a shame, because I would do TV. I would do television if it was good. If it was something I responded to, I certainly would do it.
When I think of the early influence that other filmmakers like George Lucas with THX 1138, that film that even people who haven't seen now pretend they've seen because they don't want to be left out.
Right.
But the effect it had on you and your work on your own first feature, I mean, 5 years later and rather disillusioned, you finally got it finished. But are you friendly with George Lucas? Do you see Steven Spielberg? Is there a community?
Unfortunately not, no. I'm friends with George Romero. I don't know if you're familiar with him.
Night of the Living Dead? Are you kidding?
George and I became friends in after my wife did Creepshow, 1982. He's a wonderful man. And he comes from the same basic approach to movies that I do. He loves the independent, low-budget film. And that's the most exciting time when you're doing that. Stephen and George are very, very talented filmmakers, but they're in the kind of the mile-high club. You know, they're way up there. And I don't know that they have a community going. I don't know, and I'm not a part of it. But that's all right.
All right. I've enjoyed being with you.
Thank you very much. It's been fun.
You're welcome. Pleasure.